Welcome to the Property Nomads Podcast and welcome to deep diving into the CONCACAF Champions League Final in 2022 between Pumas UNAM, which is the university basically in Mexico City, and the Seattle Sounders, a Major League Soccer club. And it was a cracking game, cracking atmosphere, and it was an adventure getting tickets in the first place. This game was obviously this year because it was CONCACAF Champions League Final of 2022. From memory, I think it was Aprilish, and this was a case of right place, right time. Now, without giving away next week's episode, next week we're going to be talking about a completely random game that was probably one of the funnest games Aaron and I have ever been to, and that's the Copa Libertadores final, because it was so unplanned, it was unbelievable. But that's for next week. This week, this was quite unplanned, and I was in Mexico with future Mrs. Property Nomads Podcast, who had oddly never been to a game of football before. Crazy. But we'd gone to a couple of games, and I happened to be on one of my favourite websites, which is soccerway.com. And soccerway.com is very good from a point of view of, fixtures, what's upcoming, things like that. And as I was on a bit of a football binge in Mexico City, at the time we'd been to see Pachuca play Monterrey. That's in an episode further on down the line. We'd been to the Azteca and saw a lot of football, saw a couple of games at the Azteca. We ended up going to another stadium in Mexico City. But this one for Pumas, it just so happened at the time, Pumas had got through to the final of the CONCACAF Champions League. Fantastic. Now their stadium holds about 65,000. It's a massive open stadium, so you are exposed to the elements no matter what you do. And we knew that the game was on a Thursday night. So we thought we'd do a bit of recon. How do you get tickets? Because ticket systems in this country, if you want to go and get tickets for a Premier League team, it's quite difficult to do most of the time. I think notable exceptions I would say to that are Man City and West Ham, where you can go on their websites and buy tickets. But this is a major final. The first leg, both games, the final is two legs, so one game in Mexico City, one game in Seattle. We thought we'd do some recon. Tickets notoriously go on sale quite late for pretty much any game in the Americas. They don't quite have the same system that we would be accustomed to over here in Europe. So we took a whole day. We went down to the stadium. All the ticket offices were closed. We were speaking to a couple of people, asking about tickets. What's the best, when's the best time to get them? And the feedback we got was come back about 3 hours before kickoff on the Thursday, and the games will be, it will be on general sale. So you should be able to go up to the Boletos ticket booth and give them the pesos and get a ticket. Delightful. So this is where we're at. It's a case of right place, right time. Any two teams could have been playing in this final, but we just happened to be in Mexico City at the time where one of the teams was participating in the final, Pumas. Fantastic. So we've got lucky there, right place, right time. We've gone down to the stadium, which is in the south of the city. We've established it. In order to get tickets, what we need to do is come back on the game day about 3 hours before kickoff and get some tickets from the ticket booth. Absolutely brilliant. Try Ticketmaster Mexico. There's no availability on there at all. Maybe it's too early. So we get to the day of the game. It's a hot day, I won't lie. It's very sunny. Forecast for the evening is pretty bad. A lot of rain, thunderstorms and lightning and stuff. That's forecast for the evening. The stadium is very open. There's a small section at the top of the stadium it's almost got like an arch over it, and there's about 3 or 4 rows where it looks like you could not get soaked if it starts raining. Now we tried making our way down to the stadium. The atmosphere is electric. The atmosphere is absolutely incredible. I think it's the first Champions League final for both of these teams, I think. And it's crazy. People are hanging out of buses, beeping their horns, fireworks are being let off. The atmosphere is building very nicely, and I like that. We got to the stadium. Kickoff, I think was at 9 o'clock from memory. So we got to the stadium about 6 o'clock. Ticket booths are closed. Crap. Okay, so we've gone round, we're asking, what time do the ticket booths open? Everyone's saying, tickets are sold out. A lot of ticket touts going around. Tickets are sold out. If you want to buy a ticket, it's going to be 1,000 pesos. At the time, it's about 50 quid a ticket. Now, for a major continental final, and from an English point of view, 50 quid a ticket, I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that. I would pay that. In terms of peso price, Mexican peso price, 1,000 pesos is pretty steep, especially as we'd established that you should be able to get tickets for about 500 pesos. The idea of paying double doesn't really appeal to me, but again, the experience, it's unlikely that you're going to experience that before. And maybe you've been in a similar situation, maybe with a different sporting event or a music gig, concert, where you think, I really want to go, but do I want to go and do I want to pay tout prices? Does this thing mean that much to me? We were having the same debate. Now, we'd walked around the ground the other day, a couple of days previous. So what we decided to do was grab some food, grab a beer, started to hammer down with rain, so not an ideal time either. And it got to about 6:15. And I said to the future Mrs. Property Nomads Podcast, I said, let's just check Ticketmaster again. Obviously, I haven't got my phone, and my phone, I think by this time, it might have been stolen. It might not have been. I don't know. Anyway, my phone's not working. She's got her phone, obviously on her network. And I said, let's try Ticketmaster. Let's see what happens. Out comes the phone. Go on to Ticketmaster. Tickets are available. Oh, this is good. Okay. Let's try and buy some tickets. I've got my credit card on me. Let's try and buy some tickets. Went through the process. Voila. We've ended up with tickets. Fantastic. About 520 pesos per ticket. This is brilliant. Even better was that they were e-tickets. So get the email to say you've bought your tickets. You get a little QR code, digital entry. Oh my days. Absolutely wonderful. Now, we might have actually paid up for tout tickets, 1,000 pesos a ticket. But by taking a step back, taking a breath, analysing the situation and allowing a bit of time to go by, and by randomly deciding to check Ticketmaster, we've ended up with tickets for this major football final. This is great. What isn't so great is the weather. In the background, it started to rain a lot more. The lightning started to set in. And we made a decision to go into the ground. We said we need to get up into that main stand. And ideally, we need to get undercover. We've got ponchos, we've got all that sort of stuff. It's not cold, but I mean, it's ferocious. This rain is ferocious. Typical, almost, typhoon style, rain. It's madness. So this is where we've lucked out a bit. We've gone straight into the ground, showed the tickets, gone straight in. And there's not many people that have got there 2.5 hours before kickoff. I wouldn't normally do that, but we wanted to secure some tickets. And we ended up getting seats right under the arch. So we're looking out upon this big open bowl. There's about 4 rows of us at the back. We're all relatively dry. It's a bit windy, but we're relatively dry. And we are watching everyone get absolutely hammered. And it absolutely belted it down until about half time, so about 10 o'clock. It absolutely belted down. Now, sporting events, nothing beats an evening game, regardless. I think any game under the floodlights is just instinctively, it's much better. Don't know what it is. It's just better. You understand what I'm saying. Now, the game itself, a very interesting game. I won't bore you with all the details. In effect, Pumas went 2-0 up. They were much the better team in the first half. Seattle came back. They were better in the second half. 2 very suspicious goals, in my opinion. Bad refereeing. Seattle have ended up drawing 2-2. The second leg in Seattle was the following week. Seattle won 3-0. They were by far the better team and they deserved to win overall. We've mentioned before on these travel episodes, and I'll mention it again definitely next week, that there's only been certain times that I've been in the ground and the noise has been deafening and it's taken me a little bit by surprise. One was at the Old Firm game, that Rangers-Celtic game. The other one I'm talking about next week in the Copa Libertadores final. This is the third time that I can recall that I have just been amazed at how loud the ground was. Pumas' first goal was a decent goal, not a bad goal at all. But the second goal, it wasn't a world-class goal. It was, from memory again, I think it was a very good cross, or it could have been a penalty, one of the two. whatever it was a decent goal. But the absolute noise that the stadium made when the second goal went in was like, it's almost like nothing I'd heard before, almost. It just this absolute roar from about 50,000 people who were absolutely soaked through to the skin. A roar, which is, they're called Pumas, so a roar is quite appropriate. It nearly blew my socks off. I didn't even cheer myself. I stood up and listened to it. I said to the Mrs. Property Nomads Podcast at the end, I said, we're lucky here tonight because I've seen a lot of football, and trust me, you are probably not going to hear a noise as good as that for a long, long time. We're still breaking her football virginity, still getting her used to games. But the point being that I would take away from this episode is the noise from that second goal is ridiculous. It's absolutely superb. But sometimes you need a bit of luck with being in the right place at the right time. I hadn't planned on going to this game of football whatsoever. Just so happens we were in Mexico City, and one of the teams that play in Mexico City had qualified for, the biggest game in the continent of North America, the CONCACAF Champions League Final. So we happened to be right place, right time. And then secondly, with a ticket fiasco, again, we've taken a step back, we've breathed, and thankfully the tickets have sorted themselves out by deciding to go on Ticketmaster rather than paying, a ticket tout and up, way above face value. So from those two sets of things, that's what I take away from it. That wasn't planned, completely spontaneous. It was good fun. The weather was atrocious. The game was really good. It shouldn't have ended 2-2. There's no way Seattle should have drawn that game. They were by far second best and had a couple of lucky goals, but it finished 2-2. They ended up winning the second game anyway. And getting home was a really good laugh because I've never seen so many people fit onto a bus in my life. So all in all, a very, very good experience. People have said to me when they've contacted about travel stuff, how good is Mexico City in general? So what I'll do, I'll take a minute or two to try and describe Mexico City. I won't give you the history because the history is very complex. But as a city, it's about 2,300 meters above sea level. It is polluted, loud, noisy, obnoxious, but at the same time, I find it quite lovable. It's relatively inexpensive to get around. The food is fantastic, whether that's Mexican cuisine or international cuisine. We've had some delightful sushi there as well. Can't go wrong. There is loads to see and do. There are so many museums, forests, parks. Museum entry is relatively inexpensive in comparison to what we would be used to as well. I think you could easily spend a month in Mexico City and not get bored. There is so much to see and do. It is an absolute behemoth of a place. So if you don't like being around a lot of people, it's not the city for you. And just be careful whenever you go of the high altitude. If you're not used to high altitude, or you're flying from a place like the UK where most of us is sea level or a few meters here and there, going to a place that's 2,300 meters above sea level, there's a bit of a difference there. So I would say when you do come across to Mexico and Mexico City especially, just be careful from that point of view. But it's a wonderful city with loads to see and do. It's like any place. It's got its good points, it's got its bad points. That is like any other place in the world. But if you do get a chance to go over there, I would highly recommend it. It's a bit of it's something a bit different, and that is what it is all about. So that's CONCACAF Champions League. That's Pumas versus the Seattle Sounders. And next week, as mentioned at the start of this episode, we are going to be talking about probably one of the favourite games that Aaron and I went to, and that was the Copa Libertadores final in Paraguay, of all places, in 2014. Do not miss this episode. As always, thank you for leaving reviews. Thank you for helping us get this podcast out to more ears. We're really enjoying blending property and travel. If you haven't yet left a review of the podcast, please do so. head over to iTunes or whatever podcast platform you listen to this podcast on, and do leave us a review. It really does help share our excitement of this podcast. So thank you very much for doing that. And until next time, hasta luego.